I'm Scott McDonald. I'm the director of the Krause Innovation Studio in the College of Education at Penn State University. I'm also faculty in science education here. And the Innovation Studio is funded by Gay and Bill Krause, who are alumni of the college, or Gay is an alumni of the college. And it's a space devoted to helping faculty think about integrating technology into their teaching. It's been around this is our third year of operation. Because we're in the College of Education, we cover broadly anybody who falls into that. So future teachers as well as counselor ed and other areas, higher education that students and faculty might be involved in. And we also do have people who use the space who are from outside of the College of Education. So the overall design of the Krause Innovation Studio is there are really two main parts to it. So there is an actual classroom part to our space that seats approximately 24 to 30 students that is used for seminar classes and things like that in the College of Education. And then there's a main body to the studio that's much more open and collaborative with a diversity of spaces within that are used for all different tasks by different people, from faculty members who are having meetings to students who are meeting to do small group work, and then individual students who just come in and drop in to do work. In the Innovation Studio, we draw on largely sociocultural theories to think about the work that we're doing. The primary theory that has guided our work is communities of practice from Leighton Wenger. Specifically within their framework, we think about authentic practices and legitimate peripheral participation. So we're interested in how our spaces designed to support academically authentic disciplinary practices. And that's a little trickier in higher education than it is in my other life, which is more science education in K-12. But that is how we've approached the work here. And in addition to using communities of practice, we also draw on cognitive theories like distributed cognition to think about how physical objects in the environment contribute to the work that students and teachers are doing when they're trying to learn new things together. So what we're beginning to explore that I think we're only just at the beginnings of is looking more at how sociomateriality might inform the work that we do. So, for example, actor network theory is something that we're exploring, and activity theory, specifically around the way activity theory thinks about tools. So we're really exploring how space contributes to a system of learning that includes the objects in the environment and the actors, the people that are there, both the teachers and the students. So those are the main conceptual pieces that we draw on when we're doing our research and our design here in the studio. So in terms of how that conceptual framework informed the actual design of the Innovation Studio, there are a number of pieces that it contributed to, but I'm going to talk about four in particular. So one having to do with, we have a mixed space. So we have a classroom space, and then we also have a large collaborative open space. So we try to think about both of those spaces, and in fact more about the open collaborative space because there's been more research done in more formal learning environments like classrooms. So one of the primary design features of the Learn Lab, our classroom that we developed, is that it's decentered, that there's no clear center or front to the classroom, so that it can change and it can be movable, and that forces faculty to move around the space. And that was an intentional design decision based on the idea that this is intended to be a community. This is not intended to be somebody delivering information to other people. So if you're going to have a community of practice, then the people in the room have to be engaged in some practices. So that was one of the choices we made in the main classroom. Something that cuts across both the large space and the classroom space is that we really wanted, one of the main foci of the design was to allow students or learners broadly to have access to each other's ideas. So there's not a lot of technology in the space, even though it's a technology space. There's essentially no computers here. But what the technology is that's here is designed to allow students to share their ideas easily. So there's display technology is the primary one, but with a set of features in the tables and in the displays themselves, it allows easy switching for students to quickly change who's displaying and what they're displaying and where they're displaying it. And all that was intentionally designed to allow the sharing of ideas easily, again, to support communities and to support legitimate peripheral participation in these spaces. A couple of the choices that we made, one having to do with the main collaborative space, is instead of providing flexible space, which is a big thing now in learning spaces, we tried for diversity of space. So we have a space at the front that's really designed for individual work, more like a bar. We have a center open space that's more casual and because it doesn't have walls and doors. And then we have a space in the back where I'm sitting now that's more conference room style that can be closed up. So we really tried to say, instead of making it flexible, let's make it diverse. And the final design feature was that we designed it as a BYOD environment. We wanted students to learn how to use the devices that they were bringing with them. And that was intentional, having to do with thinking about what we want them to accomplish as learners. And if we want them to learn to participate in authentic practices, they need to use their own tools to do that. Because if they're using super specialized tools that they can only use in our space, it doesn't map across into their regular lives, and it doesn't help them expand their repertoire of practices in a meaningful way. At least that was the theory behind that part of the design. So I think for us, the main challenges and opportunities sort of are the same thing, and they revolve around two big issues. One is the issue of theoretical framework. So I talked about that a little bit in the first part, but I think one of the things that we are working towards or working around right now is this idea of what are the appropriate theoretical frameworks to help us think about space. In our work, we talk about space as a technology, and we do that intentionally to think about the affordances of space and how other people have theorized around technology to see if we can draw on that to help us think about space. But space is also a little different than technology in some significant ways. So we're really struggling with what are the theoretical frameworks that are going to best help us analyze how these spaces work and how they support teaching and learning in explicit ways. And related to that is the question around data collection in these dynamic spaces. So whether it's a classroom where there's lots of people moving around and doing different tasks and changing groups, how do you deal with particularly audio is one of the big struggles we're having. But it's even worse for us in the open collaborative space because those spaces, people come and go as they please, and they come and do tasks, and we don't know what the tasks are. So starting to think about how do we think about more open collaborative learning spaces is one of the questions we're really trying to grapple with, both in terms of what are the theoretical frameworks that can help us do that, and what are the data collection methods that are going to best let us get at the information we need to find out if learning is really going on in these spaces. So in terms of suggestions that we'd make based on our experience, I think first and foremost, the piece that came out of our very first scholarship that came out of the Innovation Studio is the idea that you really need to have people who have learning expertise at the table when you're doing design of these learning spaces. One of the things that I found as the initial director of this space is I was on the committee designing it, and from talking with the folks on the committee, it was clear that that was not a usual state of affairs. Often they have stakeholders, people that use the space, but very rarely, if ever, do they have people who actually have expertise in learning and teaching involved in the design process. So I think if you're going to design a learning space, you got to take that seriously and include people whose expertise is learning. Another thing is that really I think it's important, and we didn't do it as well as we should have, to engage in a full design process, a full human-centered design process, so modeled after something like IDEO's process of really understanding what the people's needs are and how the space can be developed to meet those needs. So that's something I would recommend to people who are designing these learning spaces. And finally, one that I think has been really useful to us is this idea of choosing lightweight solutions. So when we first were developing the space, a lot of questions came up about what sort of technology should be in there. And as I said before, we don't really have computers in this space, but we don't have a lot of heavy technology beyond the display technology, as I said, in the space. And that was a really conscious choice because, again, the BYOD piece of it, we want students to use their own tools, but also because technology becomes obsolete very quickly. And if you build a lot of technology into your space, then you're forcing obsolescence on the space. So one of the things that I think has been good for us is to think about we don't need video conferencing systems in our space because, as is evidenced by this, Skype and Google Hangout and lots of other tools are available. So why build a lot of infrastructure into your space that can be solved with lighter weight solutions? So those are the big three suggestions I'd make about designing a future learning space.